Biological basis of behavior, nervous system. Structure of the nervous system. CNS and PNS. CNS equals brain and spinal cord. Brain includes cerebrum, cerebral hemispheres, brainstem, midbrain, pons, and medulla, and cerebellum. Forebrain, midbrain, hindbrain. Forebrain becomes cerebrum, midbrain becomes midbrain, and hindbrain becomes pons/medulla/cerebellum. PNS equals everything else. Cranial, 12 pairs, plus spinal nerves, 31 pairs. Nerves, ganglia. Afferent and efferent neurons. Functions of the nervous system. Basic and higher functions. Basic equals motor, control of skeletal muscle, sensory, the senses, automatic, reflexes. Higher equals cognition, thinking, emotions, feelings, and consciousness. Motor unit. Lower motor neurons, efferent neurons of the PNS, control skeletal muscle. Skeletal muscle cells it contacts is the other end of the motor unit. Form a neuromuscular junction. Abnormalities can occur in the motor unit, weakness. Abnormalities of lower motor neurons can cause the lower motor neuron signs, LMN signs, which can happen in addition to weakness. Signs: atrophy of skeletal muscle, fasciculations, involuntary twitches of skeletal muscle, hypotonia, decrease in tone of skeletal muscle, how much muscle is contracted when person is relaxed, hyporeflexia, decreased muscle stretch reflex. Peripheral somatosensation. Somatosensation includes 5 main ones: position sense, vibration, touch, pain, temperature. Position plus vibration plus touch equals mechanoreceptors, pain equals nociceptors, temperature equals thermoreceptors. One of differences between two types is how big their axons are. Position/vibration/touch receptors have large diameter axons. Have thick myelin sheath. Fast. Rest have small diameter axons. Slower. Touch is both. Fine touch travels in fast neurons, less precise info travels in slower ones. Many receptors found in the skin, such as mechanoreceptors, one type close to skin, another type lower. Also some in deep tissue, deep in muscle that detects stretch. Ones in muscle important for position, while ones in skin are imp for vibration/touch. Pain and temperature receptors end in uncovered terminals, don't have big structures like mechanoreceptors. Receptors send info down afferent axons. Muscle stretch reflex. Reflexes have two parts: afferent, stimulus, and efferent, response. The muscle stretch reflex causes a muscle to contact after it's stretched, as a protective response. X knee-jerk response, involuntary response of leg kicking out. The hammer hits the tendon right below the kneecap, which hooks onto the lower leg bone on one end, and a large group of upper muscles on the other. Muscles are called muscle spindles. Somatosensory neurons, afferent, in muscle spindles form excitatory synapse in spinal cord with another neuron in the spinal cord, which sends axon out back to same muscle that was stretched, and excite skeletal muscle cells to contract, lower motor neurons, efferent. Muscle on underside of leg are inhibited when the top side of leg is excited. Necessary for reflex to occur. Gray and white matter. Gray matter contains most of the neuron somas. White matter contains myelinated axons. In spinal cord, gray is on inside and white matter on outside. For brain, different. White on inside and gray on outside. Axons go down tracts of white matter. Upper motor neurons. LMNs control muscles of limbs and trunk, while LMNs that pass through cranial nerves control muscles of head and neck. UMNs control the LMNs. Found in the cerebral cortex, and synapse on LMNs in the brainstem or spinal cord. Can divide them into tracts depending if they go to brainstem or spinal cord. UMN starts in cerebral cortex, axon travels down through brainstem, and where it meets the spinal cord most of these axons cross and travel down other side until they reach LMN. This collection of axons is called the corticospinal tract. If it goes to brainstem, called corticobulbar tract. Upper motor signs. Hyperreflexia, increase in the muscle stretch reflexes. Cause is unclear, but when muscle spindle receptors are activated, without periodic stimulation of LMNs by UMNs, they become hypersensitive and you get bigger reflex. Clonus, rhythmic contractions of antagonist muscle. X-foot goes involuntarily up and down. Cause is hyperflexia, because if doctor pulls on foot activates muscle stretch reflex, so triggers antagonist muscles. Hypertonia, increased tone of skeletal muscles. Extensor plantar response, if you take a hard object and scrape along bottom of foot, normal response is flexor, toes will come down on the object. But with extensor, toes extend up. Somatosensory tracts. Somatosensory information travels in different pathways. In general, two big categories. 1. Position sense, vibration sense, and fine touch. 2. Pain, temperature, gross touch. Deliver info to spinal cord. Spinal cord carries info to the brain in one of the tracts. Crosses other side immediately, then goes to cerebrum. It is why injury to one side of brain often results in damage to other side. Overview of the functions of the cerebral cortex. Frontal lobe, the motor, prefrontal, Broca's area. Parietal lobe, somatosensory cortex, spatial manipulation.
Occipital lobe, vision, striate cortex.
Temporal cortex, sound, Wernicke's area. Cerebellum. Coordinates movement, motor plan info is sent to cerebellum, also receives position sense information, X muscle stretch fibers, and sends feedback to the cerebellum and motor areas of motor cortex. Middle of cerebellum coordinates middle body movement and walking, while the sides are involved in movements of the limbs, arms and legs. Also speech and movement of eyes. Brainstem. Connects all parts of the brain together, including the cranial nerves. Midbrain, pons, medulla. Neuron somas scattered throughout brainstem is the reticular formation, big role in autonomic functions, and controlling things like respiration, digestion, and lower/higher functions. Long tracts, collections of axons connecting cerebrum and brainstem. Two long tracts that are important, motor, UMNs, and somatosensory. Cranial nerves, most of cranial nerves are attached to the brainstem, doing many things. 12 pairs. All sorts of functions. Subcortical cerebrum. Subcortical cerebral nuclei that are located deep part of the cerebrum. Internal capsule contains many important pathways, including the corticospinal tract. Corpus callosum connects right and left cerebral hemispheres. Basal ganglia, major role in motor functions, don't have UMNs but help motor areas to perform proper movements. Also cognition plus emotion. Thalamus, sensory functions, because all senses have pathways that travel to the thalamus. Also higher functions of brain such as cognition and emotion. Hypothalamus controls the pituitary gland, the master gland that controls all other glands in body. Neurotransmitter anatomy. Glutamate, most common excitatory neurotransmitter. Reticular activating system, required for consciousness, has diffuse projection of glutamate to the cerebral cortex. GABA, brain, and glycine, spinal cord, most common inhibitory NTs. Acetylcholine, nuclei in frontal lobe that releases it to cerebral cortex, called the basilis and septal nuclei. Released for LMNs and the autonomic nervous system. Histamine, hypothalamus sends it. Norepinephrine, area in pons called the locus ceruleus that releases it. Also ANS, but less so than ACH. Serotonin, raphe nuclei in midbrain/medulla release it. Dopamine, VTA, and substantia nigra. Lesion studies and experimental ablation. Deliberately making brain lesions in order to observe changes on animals' behavior. Not done with humans. tissue removal, surgical aspiration, sucking out brain tissue, or nerve cuts. Radiofrequency lesions, used to destroy tissue on surface of brain and deep inside brain. Wire is inserted into brain to determine the area. Then pass high-frequency current which heats up and destroys tissue. Can vary current to change size, but destroys cells and axons. Neurochemical lesions, excitotoxic lesions, cause influx of calcium that it kills the neuron and excites it to death. One example is kynic acid. Destroys cell bodies but doesn't influence axons passing by. Also oxidopamine, 6-hydroxydopamine, selectively destroys dopamine and any neurons. Can model Parkinson's disease. Cortical cooling, cryogenic blockade, involves cooling down neurons until they stop firing. Cryoloop, surgically implanted between skull and brain. Most important part is it's temporary/reversible, unlike other techniques. Modern ways of studying the brain. Brain structure. CAT scans, CT scan. MRI. Brain function. EEG, external, can't tell us about activity of individual/groups of neurons. Can only look at sum total. Can tell us about seizures, sleep stage, cognitive tasks. MEG, aka squids, better resolution than EEG, but more rare because requires a large machine and special room to shield it. Can we combine brain structure and function? Yes. fMRI, same image from MRI, but can look at which structures are active, can see blood flow. PET scans can't give us detail of structure, but can combine them with CAT scans and MRIs. Inject glucose into cells and see what areas of brain are more active at given point in time. From